everyone, and welcome to EdgeNode, the only show that dares to combine all of your audio in one app. That's right. We're going to be combining your music, your podcasts, your audiobooks, your phone calls, voicemails. The recordings that you took in that one video conference. We're doing that as well. We're just going to combine all of this audio into one app. It's not going to be a usability nightmare. We're going to. It's all going to be there.
It's going to be like one big fusion of it all.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And you're going to be queuing all of that audio together. And it's going to be under 50 different menus, too, and you're only allowed to use it while you're driving.
Oh. Well, I mean... Is there... I have questions.
It's like, it's like the Hollywood pitch of audio. It's like... It's like Mulan meets War of the Worlds, but it's
well, both involve a lot of war.
Right. And so that's what we're going to be doing is we're going to be recording a lot of war on this one audio app. We're going to basically be it's going to start as like a defense contract, but they're also going to have podcasts included with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it work. We are going to make it work.
While driving.
Yes, while driving. We're gonna plug it in with like Android Auto and it's gonna be great. We're gonna have no one's going to be confused by this at all.
What about Tesla users?
See, okay, that's like tough luck, buddy.
Well, what about like Ford people? Like, don't like F-150s and over have those big like tablet computer things? Like, they're kind of screwed, man. I don't know. I think this thing has a lot of feasibility issues. Have you ever seen Ready Player One, where that one business guy was trying to figure out how many ads he can run in front of someone's like peripheral or frontal vision as they play the game?
You see, that actually gives me a great idea. We're going to plug this into the metaverse too.
Oh Christ!
Which actually reminds me, speaking of metaverse and also speaking of everything apps, today's show is going to be pretty much all about everything apps and to a lesser, more tangential extent, the metaverse, because that has kind of been on people's minds lately. The big thing that's happened recently with Meta's new earnings call is that there's been this like sort of perceptible shift away from like just talking about virtual reality, about just talking about the metaverse. As we remember, Meta's share prices, well, Meta being the kind of like parent that Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, all of these like Facebook-owned things fell under and then renamed to Meta because they were like all focused on this virtual reality thing.
Right.
They made like a $300 headset and then they made a $1,000 one that no one bought.
Yeah, still to this day, it's on Oculus shelves at Best Buy, and it's not doing too good. That is a full shelf.
I'm like walking into the Best Buy, and it's like they're paying me to take these things. It's like, hey buddy, do you want a Quest Pro? If you they like appear from behind the TV rack. They knock down all of their TVs, just like stumbling over, falls over, like hits face plants into the ground, and this poor Best Buy retail sales associate's just like, take this.
Just please,
we
somebody.
have too much inventory.
Well, it's beyond inventory. It's more like a waste. I mean, I like from the last time I followed the metaverse, it was I think sometime last year. Mark had just did the earnings call meeting. He had a NVR meeting to sort of test it with people he was trying to get to invest in the company. And then it bombed. it bombed terribly. What was it? It wasn't even like a real meeting or something like that. It was like pre-recorded, like on their end.
Yeah, and then like months down the line, he was like, "Okay, so now we have a new one. It's going to cost $1,500. We're putting the battery in the back. It's barely able to do any more than the previous one did. We're going to make it so that you can see your keyboard through it, but you're not going to be able to see your keyboard very well. It's going to have the same terrible battery life, and it's going to be called the Quest Pro, and also you have legs now.
And we're not going to call it Google Glasses because it's totally not that.
It's not. It's not a flop. No, it's not going to be a flop. That's why.
It's not going to be a flop. It's not going to be a dud. HTC can go suck an egg. We got this.
Yeah, HTC. No, and it's kind of funny. So after all of this kind of fell face first into the ground, and Meta's share prices plummeted so far that they actually ended up being below Home Depot at one point.
Oh my god. Jesus.
I was walking into like Rasmussen Hall, where we have this gigantic stock ticker over here on campus, and I'm just like watching Meta's share prices continuing to fall, and every time I saw like a green arrow on Home Depot, I was always just cheering them on, like, we can do this, Home Depot, let's go. I've got your back in this one.
I don't even mind Home Depot rating their stock prices. I mean, I'm sure they do at this point. Yeah. I mean, as much as like people steal hardware from their stores, the insurance that they get from that.
Yeah, I think you got to wonder if they just welcome that. They're just inviting it in so that they can get the insurance policy from it.
Yeah, every little time just fudge the numbers. No one really notices. At least Lowe's is far behind as a result. So that's all that matters.
For liability reasons, I am not suggesting that any of this is happening, and also the Best Buy story was fake. I don't want us to, on the first episode, to get like involved in some gigantic legal scandal.
Yeah, this is all alleged, that I say with a wink, but you can't see that wink because I am ethereal to you all.
Right. So, like, I have this Business Insider article pulled up right now. So during this recent earnings call, so Meta, for the first time in a while, posted like actual growth. Their stock price doubled, which is really not saying a whole lot because it had fallen so far.
Yeah, it was like pretty much in like the zeros of zeros.
And they had, upped sales. They had increased ad rates and retention on Instagram and things of that nature. And a lot of people are saying, well, because he mentioned AI roughly 57 times during this earnings call, that means it's no longer about the metaverse. Because this is sort of like a thing that a lot of journalists are doing now, which is during these earnings calls kind of tracking how much Mark Zuckerberg says a certain word. So recently, when he did his whole year of efficiency thing, he said efficiency like infinity times. And so this time he's saying AI like infinity times because Meta was caught flat-footed after the whole ChatGPT thing broke out. And now everyone's having just the robots write all of their high school
scripts and
papers.
Stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. And well, I mean, that seems very on brand for Mark. I mean, if there's one thing I know about self-entitled rich millionaires, if we can cite Elizabeth Holmes, they very much like to jump onto the bandwagon. And I like to go on about what's going to make them the most money as fast as humanly possible.
I think with Mark in particular, there's been this sort of perceptible jump onto any trend that is even a thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh God, Discord.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of the problem that we run into is that Zuckerberg copied Friendster to make Facebook.
Right.
He then copied, parts of other chat apps that had already existed to make Messenger. And a lot of what Facebook/Meta has created internally has utterly failed, but everything that they've acquired has done really well under their management. And so they follow that same trend that Google's following, where they're a really good acquirer, but anything they try to make in-house is just not going to work out. And the Meta thing was a big part of that.
Well, I mean, it's going to be a big part of that because they made it their whole entire brand. They hitched their whole entire company on this like superfluous idea, and there was no reason for it. Facebook was doing well. I won't say great, but it was definitely not dead. It's not Twitter, and it was surviving just fine with the community that it had. It was turning into its own little bit of MySpace, except it won, and they could just live with that into its golden age, where maybe it'll die, but it'll die with dignity. But no, they wanted to try and keep the flagship going instead of just trying to maintain what they already had, and improve on what they have, because Facebook is a cesspool of its own kind of mess and mistakes. But I digress.
And this is the roadblock that they run into going forward. It's like, how do you really follow any of this up? Because social media brands have seen a steady decline recently. As we all know, the chaos crisis, just train wreck combined with fire at the orphanage that is Twitter at the moment, it's sort of gotten a lot of their user base to slowly but surely unameliorate their social circles that they had slowly been building up there, and also a lot of the professional work that they'd done. Recently, the Manhattan Transit Authority pulled off of Twitter. A lot of these big brands are doing that, and journalists, they just can't quit Twitter because it's still
It's
the
too
most
dramatic
intuitive.
and salacious. Yeah.
Right, it's too salacious, but also it's like the easiest way to still be able to quickly publish articles in a format that still allows you to reach a wider audience. But that's slowly going away, and brands are kind of peeling off one by one. The user base is peeling off one by one because engagement is down, ad spending is down, all of this stuff. It's not really a market anymore. And then you go to other platforms, and this is pretty
like
much
Instagram or something. Well, ironically, Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, TikTok seems to be the only one that has any sort of real growth that we've seen. Meta has for a while seen a decline in user base for some of their platforms, and also, if anything, just pause in user growth. And that was a big problem when that hit, and when this merged with the whole Meta crisis was we had like a whole bunch of these platforms that had based their entire value was to advertisers, the fact that they're going to continue to grow. Facebook was going to continue to grow. Instagram was going to continue to grow. But that wall would eventually reach, right? Netflix couldn't grow its subscribers forever. Facebook couldn't just find new people to do ad spending on.
Well, yeah, and actually it's funny you bring up Netflix because a lot of people or a lot of companies last year experienced the problem of capsizing around all the same time as COVID and like everything else like kind of ended. But then afterwards they just had like a lot of money that they had lost. But everyone's approaches to it were very, very interesting. Meta to me wasn't exactly a outlier in the rat race of trying to keep yourself alive. They just did it in a very detrimental way, self-contained, mind you, but detrimental to their own company. They're hitching it more or less on an idea and trying to get everybody else to be on board with it. But relatively speaking, it's not too invasive to the company's bottom line. They're not invasive to their users, which is at least better than what Twitter is doing. I can give them that, and I do think that's what's supporting their longevity at the moment. But that's only going to keep them going for so long because I mean all you really got is the site in and of itself. But I mean everyone knows you're trying to deviate from that, so I'm not really sure what they got left.
Right, and this is sort of another thing. It's other brands have stopped necessarily hitching a lot of their traffic based off of what can be accessed through Facebook and Instagram and all of that, because then those platforms started to slowly but surely just kind of tack on features that would prevent linking to outside content from really being a doable thing on them for the most part. I mean, Instagram is a good example. Trying to link to outside content there at all is downright impossible. I mean, you can maybe throw up the occasional link on a story or do a link in bio, but the user experience behind all of it's terrible. The user experience behind using all of Meta's apps are terrible. Facebook especially, it's like you open it and it's just this clutter of
It is a
UI.
clusterfuck, yeah. And
right.
Yeah, I mean, on Meta's end, yes, it's rather accidental, I think. Like, I think there's just a lot of disorganization when it comes to Meta and the apps alongside them. I can't really speak for, I'll say, Messenger too much. I try not to use it, mostly because I don't trust it. But Facebook, I know to be just like downright atrocious. Like, there's no regulation going on over there. You can just pretty much post anything and get away with it.
Right.
Same with Instagram. In fact, Instagram might be a little worse because it's a lot more aggressive at targeting you for these things. It does seem odd to me that that anytime I want to talk about something, an ad pops up for it. And I mean, even though that's like kind of like a common-ish known thing, it is also very persistent on Instagram in particular.
Right, and a lot of this, like particularly their pivot and focus on communication did all right, but it's really difficult to monetize that. You can't really monetize WhatsApp because you start throwing an ad for anything there and people are going, heads will just roll.
Yeah, they'll just be like oh, whatever. Why do I need to add to like text my my nana or something.
Right. And this is another big thing is that like a lot of people like to use this as a sign that like ad spending is going up on Facebook, Zuckerberg is pivoting again, we're finally going to see the adults in the room. That's not happening necessarily.
Yeah.
I think people are oversimplifying a lot of the situation here when he said in a video conference like I'm still like focusing on the meta thing. I'm still burning money doing this. I'm still throwing all of your I'm still throwing all of this capital that investors are tossing at us into the metaverse. But the difference here is that ad spending has gone up, and so now the investors, I guess, are just sort of indifferent towards the fact that he's now still wasting money, because at least now there's like actual revenue growth to an extent. And ad spending hasn't seen the decline that we thought it would. Really big ad buyers had pulled their spending for a while, and this wasn't just on Twitter. This was on a lot of places because they were anticipating a big like recessive environment in the economy. Well, 18 months later, people keep saying there's going to be a recession. There's going to be a recession. Then it doesn't happen, and it returns. And so that's probably not going to last forever.
Right.
And Meta, it feels right now, is just kind of treading water to the next thing.
Yeah, well, because they are. I feel like Meta isn't going to go away. There is going to be the new flagship of the company going forward. There's just too much money sunk into this thing not to. Plus, I mean, if you're not looking at it from a creative standpoint and what Mark is trying to do with it, the Oculuses are selling great. They are still like the best VRs on the market. So they are pulling in a lot, but they are themselves a separate juncture from the main Meta company. So where Facebook and Instagram and anything adjacent to that is headed, I have no clue. However, I do know this most likely going to involve AI companion, much akin to the Bard AI that Google just announced out. Or I think maybe. I mean, I don't know if everybody has that yet. I don't want to expose myself.
Well, cool. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, podcasts in your music apps. It's a thing now. All right, so we're back. Okay, so I have a really quick question. This may be pretty personal, so feel free to not answer it. I don't know if I'm violating privacy here, but what app do you use most for podcasts?
I gotta think on that one.
You have
I guess
20 seconds.
Fine, Spotify. I use Spotify more often than not.
Okay, so when Spotify sort of like pivoted to podcasts, this was like a few years back, they had made it so that, when you go into a podcast, right, or when you try to access a podcast, the user interface would sort of adapt to it and be like, all right, so I'm just going to make it so that you can queue your episodes really easily here. Yeah. It's not going to be like the music section of Spotify where it's mostly being thrown on as a radio, and then we're going to use our algorithms to kind of just shuffle through things and see what you might be most likely to listen to right now.
Right.
And that works out. That's fine. That's good. Okay, so YouTube Music recently pivoted towards that. They added that sort of extra layer of features onto their app. I think Marques Brownlee, not too long ago, he actually like put that forward as a sort of way of potentially exploring other methods of content delivery, which was like, hey, you guys should probably consider adding podcasts to the app because Spotify's done that, and it might be a good way for particularly like YouTube itself to get more thoroughly into the podcasting game as something it's not just sort of like tangential relation to the video and like long form content on YouTube itself, which was great. It was a good idea. The problem was when it ended up actually happening and when the feature actually rolled out, it was bad. And now I'm not talking like bad in a way that's just sort of like, okay, well, at least it's like a basic functional podcast app within my music app.
Right.
And I can just sort of create cue lists. And no. It like legitimately changed nothing about the user experience between music and podcasts.
Oh.
And then also, it decided to not have anything built in that would allow you to just sort of take what you were already listening to YouTube Music. There's like no RSS or anything like that. It wasn't based off of any other podcast listings. It was only based on like what people had published to YouTube, meaning like half of your library is just not available there. And then also at the same time, there were no exclusivity deals made. So there's really no content that I can think of that's like exclusive to YouTube Music that people would actually want to listen to. And on top of that, when you try to like queue the episodes up, it's like queuing tracks in regular YouTube Music, which is to say that it's kind of a usability nightmare because you're going into like the little 3-dot hamburger menu to add it to queue. When I use a podcast app, I don't know about you, but the ability to quickly and conveniently like queue episodes in a list and just like listen to them without having to give it a second thought. When I use Pocket Casts, that
does seem, well, that's a luxury. I'll give you that.
Right.
For my background, I do podcast, or I listen to podcasts as well.
Right.
I don't listen to them like on any specific like podcast apps, unfortunately. I do use Spotify. That's as good as it gets. I got my talking gecko and Stephanie Sue to keep me going. But aside from that, my secondary app for podcasts or just music in general, outside of Spotify, is YouTube Music. I actually do use YouTube Music for the majority of things that I do. So I do understand the UI portion of it, and the fact that it is really annoying. I do genuinely agree with that. Where they sadly have all the other apps beat, it's just versatility, because they just have so many different forms of different songs and creations, different podcasts, different takes, different reactions to those things. There's just there's a bigger abundance of content on the site, and there's a lot more I don't want to say the word creativity, but there's a lot more users that are able to replicate or recreate on the same product or remix it into their different kind of style or rendition. So I usually go there for different kinds of cuts or like takes. But I haven't gotten to use it for the podcast aspect yet. I can understand why they would want to do that, though. Just trying to stay ahead of the curve, stay competitive with their opposition. I know that YouTube proper has been making leaps and bounds on trying to get more into the live streaming game, competing with Twitch with even a better deal, a 70-30 cut, still retained from the normal business they conduct there with their YouTube creators. If you didn't know, Twitch has a 50-50 split, and it's actually getting worse at this point. I think it might be leaning towards more of a 55, basically, just because they're putting everyone, including their top streamers, on a condition where they have to run like an increased number of ads, even though and it's not like YouTube where they are stoppable ads that stop the video and have them like play and have you can skip them or whatever and have just get back to the video. Is different than that. It's like one of those unskippable, like disrupting kind of ads that like interrupt a whole live stream, and it just destroys a lot of people's internet. That's why I had to stay away from Twitch for a long time myself. So they've been being a pretty strong competitor in that field, just because Twitch has been lacking and dropping the curve. So I'm not unsurprised that they would go into podcasting as well. I mean, you might as well strike while the iron's hot. And I know that they're probably like gassed up right now, taking sips up from all of their Kool-Aid. It's a good time for them too. Anyways, if I'm not mistaken, they already had a change in management, in direction with the new CEO. I don't remember his name though. It's not Susan anymore. It's a guy. It's a guy that's really into NFTs. I don't like him too much. But
it's kind of funny because as soon as Susan left and people stopped just sort of like complaining about her all the time.
This guy just showed up and
now I just don't know his name.
Exactly. Well, see, the thing, I don't know his name. I just know he likes NFTs and people immediately don't like him. And I like to bandwagon so much. So
yeah, Neil Moen. That's it.
Yeah, Neil Moen. Yeah. No one really knows what they expect from this guy just yet. I mean, they're not really expecting much just because of his reputation so far. But I really hope he doesn't do anything worse. I mean, we were talking about it earlier in the last take, but like Meta's been having problems with that too, with their changes in management, by implementing different people into in their internal management. I forgot who's manning the the Meta proper, or at least the Oculus portion of it. But I think that had a change in hands recently too, and that guy was like head of the portion of the advertising department that was like really like targeting people. Twitch too. They just had a change in leadership with a different CEO. So a lot of companies are changing direction, stepping down and trying new things. And I know that YouTube is trying to stay on top of that. That's totally understandable why. These are their two main competitors from a pragmatic standpoint. YouTube is no longer quite just the place you go for like random videos or memes or anything like that. You can almost go anywhere for that too. Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, et cetera, et cetera. So it makes sense for them to try and expand and branch out, especially when all these other the platforms are lacking. The streamer wars are going crazy right now. Netflix isn't the only competitor. Now you got Hulu, HBO Max, Peacock, Paramount. I mean, this is crazy. Amazon Prime. I have like what, 4 different free trial subscriptions back to back just last year. Disney Plus literally jumped on my bones the second that they released. Like everyone is trying to get everybody. They're trying to make their dollars where they can, and they're trying to retain their properties and make them into universes. Decades long franchises. Now are all of those going to work out? Probably not. But those are going to be entertaining in of themselves. But I can see how YouTube, while they still have a chance, is trying to capitalize on what is still a somewhat untapped market, being the internet.
What do you mean? You saying nobody's subscribing to Peacock right now?
Oh yeah. People are subscribing to Peacock. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying like no one's going for like a premium plan or something.
Are you
like
insulting
that.
our Lord and Savior Quibi?
Dude, who the hell uses Quibi?
Who the hell uses Quibi? I mean, I don't know. Whoever did use it is probably dead. Because
because they're dead.
Dead because Quibi's long dead.
I know they're dead. I literally had their subscription until their death. I literally was there.
And then there's Go90.
Christ. Yeah, no, that was another one I missed
which turned almost into a verb for like the streaming service dying. I think Nilay Patel invented a scale based off of Go90 for how doomed a streaming service is.
Oh man, I felt so bad for Go90 because I really did like a couple of their shows on there. And then one day I was just chilling in bed, and then I clicked on the app and there was nothing. And I tapped on it a couple more times. I was like, what's going on? And then I tried to delete it and uninstall the app. And right before I pressed uninstall, the thing said, "This app can no longer be re-downloaded from after you delete it. Would you like to continue uninstalling?" I was like, "Why?" I googled it, and then sure enough, they were like, "Yeah, burned."
Yeah, but and I guess just like getting into the broader point of things here, Spotify's the chief of Spotify's podcasting only a couple of weeks ago left. And that was a really big departure, and he had a few choice words on the way out, which was basically just like, Spotify has basically no internal direction. The corporate culture is becoming incredibly unfocused. We have audiobooks now, and it's becoming kind of a mess in terms of what we want the product to look like. And recently they had their gigantic home feed redesign, which I can't think of a single person I've talked to that's liked it. Basically, for those of you who don't know,
I've been let me look at it while we're doing it.
They made it into TikTok. It's kind of like how YouTube sort of emphasized short form content in the form of shorts. And they, suddenly started pushing shorts on everyone and just being like, this is what's going to happen. It's like,
the hell? Oh, I did not notice this. Oh wow, are they just like doing shorts of people's music videos?
Yeah, no, and that's what their home feed is now. And so instead of like having the songs that you want to listen to in front of you, and that's the thing, YouTube Music for a little bit was offering kind of a safe harbor or something of a refuge from this TikTokification of the home feeds, and it was very focused. It's like you go here, and also taking advantage of the diversity of content that's available on YouTube. Just generally, YouTube Music was like, hey, we have all of these different permutations of content here. We have all of these independent creators that have just gone entirely on YouTube, and they're starting here, and this is focused entirely on music, but also music videos, because video content is what YouTube really shines at. And so more than Spotify even, their featured music videos became a big part of that. But your home feed, for the most part on YouTube Music, I would say, is far less generated or artificial than it would be on Apple Music or Spotify. It's mostly geared towards like stuff you've already listened to, and it's like these big panes right at the top of any YouTube Music home feed. It's like, this is the stuff you should listen to again if you want to, and also here's some other stuff which
I agree. And on top of that, YouTube Music still also does try to keep its main focus around it being a not just long form content, not just music or a podcast or anything like that, but primarily for videos. They're trying to keep they try and retain the video content above anything else, because that's where they started, so they have a deeper understanding of it. YouTube Music started with music videos, very reminiscent of Vivo, except better. From there they grew off of that benchmark. Even now they do things that I don't see a lot of apps doing these days. They still have their own explore tab. Which is a lot more comprehensive than say Spotify. As you go to their app here, and that's just not available. You have a search engine with those exploring of genres through those shorts, but they're not full albums or anything like that. They're not as effective. YouTube also tries to keep you up to date with say what's the hottest on charts. Right. Their trending lists. It's a lot. They ripped it straight from the YouTube algorithm, because they said it's not really ripping. It's just they share the same one, and then essentially they're able to kind of give you like a live what's hot, which Spotify does do technically, but you kind of have to do it take it more on like good faith. That is like what's top in the charts, like what's the hot, and even then you're going off of what's Spotify's numbers, not necessarily YouTube or just or everything else's. And you can trust YouTube's more because they're part of Google, so they have a bigger algorithm, a bigger traffic feed. They're able to actually, when they say what's trending, you can trust it's literally what's trending. So those are just already two things that me personally I enjoy, but also YouTube also features a radio station. You're able to create your own radio station now. Right. They're just if they started out behind in a lot of ways, they're definitely catching up, and that's where Spotify and, in my opinion, Apple Music is starting to dawdle, because they now are directionless. They don't really know where else to go because they've been dominating for so long. It's almost like trying to teach an old dog new tricks, but like the new tricks are pretty much how to take a dump different.
Yeah, and audio and
like take a pee
audiobooks
standing up. It's just like, why?
Yeah, and audiobooks, I just think it was such a bizarre turn for them, and it didn't follow anything else that they had taken in terms of like their overall product strategy, and it caused a lot of people even internally to be very skeptical that Spotify would have a future going forward, instead of being something that would just be evergreen and be able to push the boundaries of how people listen to music. It's trying to expand into all these other verticals that it simply didn't need to do so. And I mean, with YouTube Music, the focus on video is a lot of the reason why I continue to use the app and why I continue to enjoy it. I mean, other than YouTube Premium, just including it in its right. subscription. But a lot of people have rightfully so criticized it for not being quite as good as Google Play Music, which preceded it. But
correct.
I think the focus on video is, something that gives me the most time on that app. I remember, with Antihero, there was Tonight with Phoenix and Ezra Koenig, and then the most recent one being Boy's a Liar Part 2 with Pink Panthers. I saw those videos, must have been like 50 times. All of those were on YouTube Music.
Yeah,
right?
all those are going to get on YouTube Music, and some stuff is are things that you can only find on YouTube Music or only find on YouTube.
Right.
A lot of stuff that were created started out on YouTube. They might not have had big record labels produce or turn these into EPs, albums, things that could be put on these different Spotify channels or get that same amount of attention. So there are a lot of songs that have been lost to time, so to speak, and can only really be found on these sites like YouTube. So YouTube Music also has gains in that as well. They're able to just retain archived content from years ago and have multiple versions of it. So not only are you getting the original, you can possibly get remakes or renditions or different versions that have existed that you may have heard in your life. Spotify doesn't really offer that same level of versatility. It's almost like where Spotify or YouTube Music can kind of keep up just in terms of sheer engineering or just sheer what. Help me out. Word.
Yeah, well, and a lot of it's a lot of brute force, right?
Thank
That's
you.
Involved in it.
It's a lot of brute force. But they don't have nostalgia, which is what YouTube does have.
Right, and then it's all of that experimental content that gets published to YouTube that then gets funneled into YouTube Music, and the podcasts just doesn't follow that trend in my opinion, just because it's very unclear as to what's a podcast unless you check this tiny text label below it. And
which I agree. It's in UI terms, it's pretty lackluster. But with everything, I think it'll tighten up in time.
Hopefully.
And I really think it shouldn't take them too long. I mean, it's not like we're dealing with, say, I don't know. I won't say Apple Music. Apple Music's doing great. Spotify too. But YouTube, I don't really think would have a big deal in general, just because a lot of the podcasts that exist on Spotify do also exist on YouTube. Say H3 podcast. I think Joe Rogan Experience also uploads their stuff there too. So in terms of converting anyone or having any transition issues, you're not gonna have much. It's basically just going from one app to another seamlessly. So I don't really think that they're gonna have much of a problem in getting people on the bandwagon so long as they keep up with it. But right now, it is in the gutter. I do agree.
Well, on that note, we're going to take another quick break, and when we get back, my adventures with Beeper and why having all of my chats in one place was probably not a good idea. All right, we're back. And we're back on a very somber note. So a project that I had been following for over a year was something called Beeper. Now, I just want to do another quick little survey here. How many apps do you use to communicate with people on a regular basis, just in terms of text communication, right?
I'd probably say 3 on average, but sometimes if I'm willing to use Messenger for a time, 4.
Right, and that's a lot. When you think about it. It used to be you would just open up an IM client and you would put in your AOL Messenger, your Microsoft Messenger. I'm too young to have ever lived in that era, but from what I hear, it sounded magical.
Sounded peaceful.
The problem was, slowly but surely, these platforms ameliorated features, and those open standards that would have allowed all of them to just talk to each other weren't there at the beginning. So then things just kind of fragmented, right? And so now you have to have 5 apps on your phone to talk to 5 different family members. I, for example, have had to use WhatsApp to talk to a few friends and family. There's Line to talk to pretty much anybody who lives in like very specific parts of the Asia Pacific region. Most notably, like my brother, his wife, a few friends and whatnot. And then there's Discord, which I hate. Then there's just SMS, like Google messages and stuff like that. Texting on Android has gotten significantly better, or just sort of the default messaging experience. Google has rolled out a lot of things in terms of making just chat smarter by default, and having something called RCS, which is basically like an open platform version of what you would call iMessage. And then there are just other miscellaneous or incidental things, like, of course, sometimes you'll use like email and whatnot. All right, this is a lot, right? This is a lot to manage, and trying to get all of these notifications in all of these different places, it just feels like sometimes you're juggling a bunch of different things.
Right.
You have all these apps taking up storage space on your device, or they're, sending different notifications, and you're jumping between them, and the UI is all different, and it gets confusing, right? From a usability, from just a basic usability standpoint, chat is broken. So Eric Mijakovsky, some listeners might know him from all the way back in 2013.
Right.
He launched this fun little smartwatch called Pebble, and it was really big, especially amongst like nerdy kind of tech community, which was like seeing the rise of smartwatches, but wanting something a little bit simpler that would just page their notifications, and, or even just people who thought the smartwatches in general were a bit of a daunting investment, and they cost too much, and the battery life at that time was just bad. So
just ridiculous for no reason.
Right, and the whole thing was it was and then the whole point was to like streamline it, but then that ended up falling through because it was based entirely off of crowdfunding, and there was a lot of mismanagement, and costs went up, and things just didn't look great for Pebble. And Pebble, all in all, was very small, didn't have a big user base. So that's kind of been Eric Mijakovsky's whole brand, right? It's basically like, here's an annoyance that I have that I know a few other people who are really closely follow tech are going to kind of vibe with.
Yeah.
Or they'll just have some memories of some things, and like out of blind nostalgia, they'll want to return to that thing, right? And that was the whole impetus behind Beeper, which was an app that he created to kind of consolidate a whole bunch of different chat apps into one thing. It would basically connect up to their server, and WhatsApp would go through it, Discord would go through it, your Slack and IRC or whatever would go through it. All of this stuff would just be combined into a single interface, a single streamlined thing. And sure, it won't be able to handle all of the features or all of the little niceties that these apps provide. But the point is that it's not forcing you to jump between 50 different things to use it. And in many ways, it's kind of retread of a lot of the ground that had happened back in the days of IM clients. It's a novel concept in terms of by today's standards, but it's also a very promising concept. It's something that could potentially really help a lot of people out, because they keep needing to add these different apps into their lives to be able to communicate with a few people. And I'm sorry, guys, but like no one's going to use Signal. I tried once and it utterly failed, and I have basically given up on Signal being the future. Telegram is full of crypto bots. Discord is Discord. But and the simple fact of the matter is, you're not going to be able to get everyone on one thing. I mean, sure, a vast majority of people in North America might be using iMessage, but well, not a vast majority, but a lot of people in North America might be using iMessage, and that level of platform lock-in is one of the reasons why iPhones just in general sell better here than they do in other contents. But that's not going to be the case for everybody, and it's going to cause some lock-in, and you're not going to be able to just sort of ready yourself for the next big thing whenever that comes, right? And it's going to curb stomp innovation, because now people are just unable to get into a new chat app that might have a really cool feature that a lot of people like. So Beeper's great for that reason. It's sort of trying to consolidate your life a little bit more. It's trying to make tech a bit less confusing. The problem is, you can only really do so much with these closed platforms, right? You can only have so many features of WhatsApp within this other app that has no related tech, that has no related underlying principles in its design. And so a lot of the things like, for example, video calling is not supported by Beeper. And that's fine, right?
Right.
But then the issue is Beeper itself also is a bit confusing. For example, it relies entirely off of having like a desktop app handy. You have to use the Windows app. You have to use the Mac app. You have to use the Linux app for it to be able for just to be able to add services, to be able to even do the like onboarding thing at the beginning where you're even just getting the code so you're able to use the app. And that's kind of a problem, especially for people who don't have access maybe to a full computer to use it at the time, or maybe just people who want to only use it on their phone and they just like the desktop apps for these chat apps fine. And I ran into that problem. I actually had to borrow a Windows PC from a family member to be able to set it up because I mean, it is doable on a Chromebook through the Linux container, but the issue is it's only on certain ones with like certain hardware on the inside. It's very confusing, right? Yeah. It's what I'm trying to say is that it's very fragmented and the features are not the same between the desktop and mobile, which for anybody who is not very tech savvy is already a non-starter, right? They want to be able to download an app and just use it. Right. And I was on the wait list for over a year for this, so color me a bit disappointed. And also, another big problem is that it doesn't import chat history from certain apps, right? It will import your chat history from WhatsApp, but from your Discord direct messages...
Not so much.
Yeah, it's a blank slate. And the problem with Discord is that, like, literally one of the only reasons why I still grit my teeth through communicating with people on it is because I already have years worth of communications with some people stored there. And if I need to pull up an interesting thing or an interesting article that was shared with me years ago, then it's the only place I could really do it for some people.
Well, yes, it's the only place for a lot of people, honestly. I mean, especially like after COVID, Discord was like kind of the place to be for direct messaging.
No, like during COVID lockdowns, it was the like only window into the outside world I had for many people, and it served its purpose there. Which is not to say it really serves its purpose in any other environment, because it's focused entirely towards large groups, and you can tell. And that's the thing. It's like Beeper would have been a great way for me to just be like, hey, what if I could use Discord without having to use Discord? And all of the baggage that comes with that, and not having to like open it up and see 50 different news updates from this platform. The issue is just that Beeper itself has a lot of missing features in this very early stage of its development. And it's still new, it's still young, it's still fresh. Its public rollout is still very recent, and it only recently started going free, and you only recently started being able to use it without paying for a subscription. So it's going to eventually get better, I think. It's just for now, my dreams of having all of my chats in one place are just
dashed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem like a bit of a disappointment if I from what I can tell. I unfortunately haven't been able to use the app myself, so I haven't been able to experience the tragedy in real time as you have. But I do definitely understand the disappointment of not having that level of versatility. Well, not even. Well, honestly, we can't call it versatility. Just the access to privacy and feeling like you can have all your like stuff organized. It does that stuff really does feel important, especially like with people with busy day-to-day lives who need to prioritize certain things. Like I know for me personally, I have like so many different contacts over like different like messaging apps, and not particularly because like I can't coordinate them all under one app. Just not everybody use the same like social media or contacts. Not everyone does like straight phone numbers or direct messaging these days. Some people prefer Instagram. Some people prefer Snapchat. So it's just a lot harder to get in touch with people. So an app like that really does seem cool, like important,
Right.
Like but more importantly, it does seem like it would be protected, and it seems like it would be private, like a lot more. You'd have a lot more access to privacy.
Right. I mean, I'm not losing all hope. Again, there's a very real chance that it could start getting a little bit better or easier to use on mobile, especially, which is where a vast majority of the reason why I downloaded it was because like I want to use this on mobile. Desktop is less of a concern because switching between apps on just like a laptop or something like that,
It's pretty
it's
easy.
that's kind of the whole thing, right? It's like Windows, Chrome OS, Mac OS, they've all been designed so that you can switch between things in a very timely manner. On mobile, it's a little bit less like that. It's a bit less intuitive.
Yeah, you have to swipe and go to another app, or I mean, unless you're on iPhone, you can just scroll towards it. Or
Right, because these apps are meant to be siloed, contained experiences, and suddenly when you have like 50 of them, it becomes a lot harder.
Yeah, it becomes multiple experiences. It's almost like having multiple tabs open on your computer in of itself. So I can totally see the complications that would lead to. I feel like maybe it would probably have a better time existing, like maybe as a watch primary, like in terms of messaging. Just from the way you describe it, it sounds like it would be very oriented towards like incognito, or at least like instant message. So so just trying to have your have your message like read immediately, like no social media or anything like that, or username tags.
Right.
So so I feel like it would have a pretty good life, or a pretty good survival rate. So it's starting out there, or as well as desktop, if they wanted to pivot or try it out, maybe even try tablets first. But but I do see the problem on their end too, like just trying not to to make another Discord or make another Reddit with their platform, because it's really easy to do that. I mean I can't imagine that anybody that made like, again, like aforementioned Discord or Reddit expected them to have direct messaging get as big as they did, like especially with Discord, they have like entire chat rooms and like communities and stuff. Now, are they moderated well? God, no. And that's probably what this person is having an issue with too, if I had to guess.
Right. And it's a big like separating the dogs from the wolves kind of thing. Back in the instant messenger days, where you would have like your Microsoft Messenger and AOL and your one client, those platforms were designed to plug into all of those other services, right? They were designed to be used in a third-party app of some kind. The problem I see now is that, like, despite the fact that these apps are continuing to do less and less that can actually differentiate themselves from each other, they are actually getting more and more fragmented, and they aren't designed to be plugged into one thing either. And I think that's a huge hurdle that Beeper needs to overcome, is that, like, I mean, do you really want to have, for example, WhatsApp and Discord in the same thing? Because there are very particular features that both provide that are going to be incredibly separate and just sort of siloed out and not necessarily ever accessible on Beeper. And in that regard, and I think that mostly just comes down then to just like general changes in these platforms and their policies, and it would take a huge cultural shift in a lot of these companies to sort of see the forest for the trees. And that might be happening, right? Like ActivityPub is becoming that for social media, where you have all of these things that plug into something that sees ActivityPub, and it's all just your social media feeds in one feed.
Yeah.
But maybe it might happen for messaging. I know the European Union definitely wants that to happen, but for now, it's sort of a pipe dream.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. I'm still hopeful, and Beeper, for what it's worth, is very usable. I think for the services and apps that it does support, basic communication works just fine. I think the problem is, though, that it's not meant to be a full replacement. And Beeper makes that very clear. Eric has made that very clear in all of his correspondences on his like Substack newsletters and stuff. It still is a little bit disheartening. On that note, though, I think that is the end of our first episode. How did that feel? How was that?
You know, it felt pretty smooth to me. Felt like we didn't have too many technical difficulties, if any.
Nice. Well,
Yeah,
I
we
will.
survived it.
Well, I'll read us out. This has been EdgeNode. Our station manager is Lily Conducey, and our production manager is Cyan Schumann. Our theme music was composed by Grace C. Elliott. Special thanks to the University of Alaska Anchorage for providing the equipment and studio, and we'll see you next time. You can stay tuned on KRUA 88.1 FM or check out our podcast feed on theurbansands.net. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, sometimes it's not worth it to have an Everything app, Everywhere app, All-at-Once app.